Right, step-by-step details on creating a filter pocket surgical style mask. First, you want to pre-wash your fabric. Pre-washing will get it to shrink as much as it needs to, so that your mask ends up being the right size. The second step is to, pre-washing also will remove a fair amount of lint, which is good. Making my measurements as we go. 17 inches by 9 inches. That will end you up hopefully with about an 8-inch by 8-inch square mask that then you put folds into. First thing you're going to do is to fold in like this, and then fold in again. So you're making a hem, right? And then I ironed these before I stitched it so that the fold would stay in place, but you don't have to. And then I stitched it in place. The reason I'm doing that is so that when my mask is complete, I will have a finished edge that will not fray, and then I can join these together and then there'll be a slit. The technique is to put these seams together and do a zigzag stitch for about this much in and for about this much at the end. Now I'm going to do this stitching and then I will show you how to open it up so that it lays flat. It's really kind of a cute technique, fun technique. Right, so here we go. I'm going to put my stitch on the zigzag setting and I line up my edges. The key to this trick is that you want, when the needle goes in on the far right, you want it to not go into the fabric. And I will show you why later, but let's see if that's happening. See, so now I'm navigating it so it doesn't go into the fabric, right? So you still want it to get through both layers, so you have to check this and make sure it's going to get through both layers. And if you have to, make the stitch wider so that you can make sure you're getting, yeah, right, so like that. And I'm only going to do about 2 inches, and then I'm going to go on this side and do about 2 inches because I want a 4-inch opening for my filter. I'm going to do that and then come back to you. Okay, so here we are, and I am just now pulling this apart so that I'm flattening out the seam. But the zigzag helps to keep it all together. And this ends up being such a nice way to do it. I'll show you here. And there we have a beautiful flat seam. It is a flat opening, but it will open, right? So now we do the rest of it, which is to make the straps and attach them. This is bias tape made with a different flower. It's kind of nice because then you can get a little bit of variety, have some fun with your mask. I choose to connect my bits of fabric together so that I can make a long strip of fabric, because this fabric is 45 inches wide. And if my straps are usually 36 inches. So if I don't use the entire length, I'm actually losing about this much fabric with each mask I make. and I'm making a lot of masks, so it makes sense to me to connect my bias tape together and to make a long strip, which I then will turn into straps and cut them into the right size. So I'll get more straps for my fabric, because I don't know if you know, fabric is in short supply because everybody is shopping for fabric and making masks. Okay, so to make the bias tape, I have another video on that. I'm not going to show you how to do that here, but I am going to show you how to sew the bias tape into a strap, and it's fairly basic. So basically the bias tape is like this. The seam meets in the middle, and you very easily you can fold it over and have a somewhat finished look. I go very quickly, so my stitching is not the most perfect, but it's good enough. And you just join it like this, stitch, straight stitch. The reason you do that is that, or you use the bias tape, is that if you stitch in the middle here, you know that it's not going to have raw edges coming out, because the stitching holds the raw edges to the inside. So now I'm just going to stitch, 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 and make a long strap. Here's the bias tape made into a strap. And then now all we do is measure out 36-inch lengths, and I'll cut them into pieces so that we can use them as ties. Great, so now that I have my ties cut, I always tie the end of one end, and that is to prevent the thread from coming out, because I have cut the thread, it doesn't have a back stitch on it, and this just holds everything into place. I've got these knots in it, so it makes, oh I know, I'll put knots in the other side, yeah, and then cut it in half. And so then they can be equal when I cut. Because one side is the sewing end and the other side is the cutting end. But these are 36-inch straps, and the way I'm going to show you for the first mask is I'm going to need 18-inch straps, because 4 18-inch straps per mask. Now we have our flat piece of fabric, and we are going to turn it inside out. Right. Then I feed, this is a little ugly. Then I feed 4 straps, and what I do is I tie them together so that they won't kind of get in the way as I sew. Then I feed them in through here. And then I take each one and I sew it in one of the corners. I watched a tutorial, read a tutorial by Sarah Maker, and that's her website, Sarah Maker. And thank you, Sarah, for giving me the inspiration to get started on surgical masks. I deviate a little bit from how she does it, but yeah, you know, it pays to get started, to have something to get started, and it's there on the internet. Now, I'm gonna pin it in the corner. Yeah, +2 with stitches you do get a more consistent product. Yeah, what can I say? I'm a DIYer. I'm proud of it. So we want these in the real far corners, right? Because if they're in the real corners, then here it is with the pins in 4 corners. And now I'm going to stitch that up. Okay, sewn up. And I'm going to trim some of these threads out, the extra threads. And what's nice about this style is it's so easy to make something that you need, and it is, and can wear right away. You know, it takes less than an hour if you get some practice, and you can have your own influence on the design. You can adjust. This is just my way of doing it. Okay, see how cute this is? Now I want to tell you that this method, look at that. This could be a mini backpack. It could be all kinds of things. So it's a design for a mask, sure, but a simple sack shape can be used in a lot of ways. Now, you could use this mask as is, but usually what happens is around the cheeks, you need a little bit of a curve, right? So the way people are doing it is they're sewing in pleats. So a pleat is the typical pleat, and they're doing it in the style of a surgical style mask, right? A surgical style mask will typically have 3 pleats. I have found that for this size of square, I prefer to do 2 pleats. There are a couple of reasons for that and I'll tell you what they are. So with 2 pleats, I think it's good enough for getting around the corners, right? It's a little bit hard to get some consistency with the fabric. I think the 3 pleats are for paper. And if you want to avoid having an overlap here, which certainly you do want to avoid doing, and I'll tell you why, you want to, it's easier to do it with 2 pleats. And so what I do is I do 2 bigger pleats, and I'll show you a finished product when I'm done. But you can decide how many pleats you want. You could even run some elastic and have it pulled together, although I will tell you elastic has additional fabric materials, and elastic is a little hard to get right now. It's like everything is hard to get right now. So this is surgical style. Okay, so the pleats. So I'm going to iron it first so it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to fold 2 pleats. I suppose, let me see if I can get a 3rd one in. I'm going to do 2 for you. And we'll discuss whether I like my idea of 2 or 3 pleats after I'm done. I could change. Okay, now sewing 2 more of these since that's what I have straps for. Right, so now I have 3 sacks, and some people have been using just these as masks, but we like the pleat because it gives you a better fit. And so now we are going to look at, is it 2 pleats or 3 is the question, right? So each pleat, according to the instructions, was 1/2 inch apart. But what that does is it gives you 1, 2, 3 inches of pleats. And I want to say a 1/2 inch pleat is a little difficult to execute. It means like you're doing that much. So I think that's the difference between what I'm doing and what's recommended. Is I really like a 3/4 inch pleat, right? So if you're doing 2 3/4 inch pleats, what's nice about it too is I think you can just go to the halfway point, right? So that's 1, and that is cute. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this off, make this, and then, oh, well, I won't. I'll just pin it here. And I'll have to do some measuring to make sure I'm mostly straight. You know, it's a little organic. It can be a little off, but you don't want it to be too lopsided, especially if you're selling it. Okay, right? So here, that's pretty good. And that's a 3/4 inch pleat, I would estimate. And then another 3/4 inch pleat here. And that looks nice. Okay, and I'm going to pin that. I don't even want to do the 1/2 inch pleats, I'll be honest. Maybe it's for a bigger size or something, but I like this 3/4 inch pleat. Okay, there we go. Isn't that cute? Then we just, so now what I do is I just top stitch here along the edge. You go forward and back a little bit to make sure you've got a knot here. And then I go here and I go back and forth on each of these edges because I want to make sure it's nice and secure. The other thing I want to tell you is that I want you to be very careful not to overlap these pleats, because if you overlap the pleats, it will cause a problem in your ability to insert the filter. Let's talk about the positioning of this slit. The other thing that I like now that I'm looking at it is a centered slit. I wasn't really sure if I should put the slit near the top, near the center. See, it's varying. I think I like the slit near the center because what that is doing is it's making it very visible and easily accessible. And then it'll make it easier for you to insert your filter. So that's my new standard. Okay, so that's how to make a surgical mask. Let me finish this up and then I'll show you the result. And there it is, surgical style mask. There are some things that I see that I want to work on. One is making this cup out more, but we'll see. And then I have yet to try these on. Some people are using elastic t-shirts for ear loops and things like that. So I'll do some trying out on that sort of thing. Okay, video.